Hey, what's up, guys? Arkham Reporter convinced me to do a bookshelf video, and Mr. James LaFond has helped organize my books. They haven't been cataloged yet, but he did this when I was out doing errands and came back, and he had uh, helped organize and clean up my man cave for better creative efficiency. And so I picked this shelf here. Just get into it, right? Charles Baudelaire, Paris Spleen, his prose poems. I actually like um, poetry. I like poetry, but I prefer prose poems and I prefer free verse. The vast majority of free verse is absolute garbage. But the ones that work are amongst the best poems, or even some of them are dramatic narratives that you will find. And Paris Spleen is great. Of course, Baudelaire, the Fleur de Mal, right? The infamous Flowers of Evil that got him in trouble for obscenity, I believe in the 1860s. So let's just go down. Let's give some symmetry here. More prose poems, right? Arthur Machen. Let me adjust this for you. Oh, you're crazy. Arthur Machen, Ornaments in Jade. These are prose poems he wrote in the late 19th century, but it wasn't printed, I believe, until the 20s. I had gone over this, and this is also, like I said, dramatic prose poetry. My favorite. This is for what is it? La Saison des Feux. My French is pretty bad, but A Season in Hell, Arthur Rimbaud, okay, infamous. The Drunken Boat was included here, and A Season in Hell. Yeah, I like Rimbaud a lot. And below here we have W.E.B. Du Bois, Dark Princess. But what is this? This is the little known, I guess you could say, black nationalist Iron Heel. His version of like the Jack London's Iron Heel. I only heard about this book by reading a Wyndham Lewis book, which it's not in this shelf, but I will go over at some point. But reading that book, he offered this book. Now, like I said, I have not read everything yet. I've only read the beginning of this. It's very cool, written in the 20s. You know? An insight into the interesting rising tide of what. Of course, Robinson Jeffers, I'm always a fan of. This is the slim volume that's available usually the most available thing he has, selected poems. I actually had two of these. I gave one to James. Jeremiah Scott Helf, God help, right? Pseudonym Black Spider. I went over this for the last Halloween. Essentially, like a kind of Protestant horror, technically a giant monster story. Black Spider. Right? Civil War stories, of course. Ambrose Bierce, known for not just his horror, but also for these. His writing is like modernist writing. Okay, even back in the 18th century. And this is a guy who was a soldier in the war. When he described Shiloh in this, the dark humor and the horrificness of this is unlike any other account of the Civil War given. Okay? C.S. Lewis, of course. We have the two books here. Surprise by Joy. I got this for like 50 cents. I at the Women's Auxiliary, my old job. It was the former Salvation Army Hospital. They still had this thing where you would put 50 cents in for a soft cover. Books that people would just bring and put on this shelf that had a locked coin box. Okay, so it was done on the honor system. Yours truly, of course, is a man of honor. So I paid the way it was said. But I have not read this yet. This is basically C.S. Lewis, of course, famous Christian apologist and author. When he was an atheist, of course, and of course, like Tolkien, he was in the Great War, and it affected him. That his strength is his. Actually, my favorite work of his. It is a bizarre, crazy third part of his science fiction, if you want to call it that, trilogy. But that hideous strength is so bizarre, so weird. Even Orwell had reviewed this in the 40s. This came out during the war, always the war. Bizarre. It's like a weird Doctor Who episode, but like no doctor. And Orwell liked some of the themes in this. Some of the themes you could argue were seen later in 1984, but he didn't like the supernatural elements, of course. I love this. Is a crazy book. You know, Edward Bellamy. Looking backwards, of course, this is one of the first utopian literatures by Mr. Bellamy. I believe he was a Union Army officer. He wrote this about a guy falling asleep and waking up 100 years into the future and then seeing this utopian society. And essentially, it's a bizarre thing. You have a kind of an industrial army. You have pneumatic tubes anywhere. You actually have bands playing shifts. So if you want to hear music, you will hear a band playing and you turn the tube on, you can hear it. Crazy book. Actually started a political movement called the Nationalists, who were then co-opted by, of course, the late 18th century, 19th century, like left-wing movements like the Populists and the Grangers and the Free Silver people. But very interesting. I like this book. People make fun of it. I like this book. Technically a science fiction book from the 80s. Okay, so now I go to French symbolist poetry. Symbolist. This book was expensive. Holy jeez. But you got all the, not only do you have the famous ones, you have some of the more obscure ones in here. Great book. But I like Decadent. I like it. I prefer Decadent. Of course, I've gone over the Flowers of Evil. L'Autrement, right? A French, I believe he was French, but born in Uruguay. Mal d'Oro. I went over this. It's like a kind of prose poem, like a mad criminal mastermind, lapsing often into surrealism. Like I said, if the Joker character took like acid with his insanity already, and then wrote a book, it would probably be like of course, Paul Verlaine, another decadent poem. Not my favorite, but he had some good stuff. Of course, infamously, him and Rimbaud were lovers. Oh, very decadent. I'm like, what the hell? This guy changed his mind rather quickly, actually. Very interesting life he had, but I got to get to the books here. This one, I had gotten this book. I read the beginning of it. Caesar's Column, Ignatius Donnelly. I need to actually read this again. This is one of the many books came out. There were many books that kind of copied Looking Backwards, but this is one that copied it, but in more realistic fashion, because this is essentially a dystopian future war kind of resistance story. Like this is way before the Iron Heel by Jack London. Very interesting. And of course, The Human Drift. What is this? This is actually, I'm gonna go over this separate. This is by King Camp Gillette. Who is that? Well, that's the guy who made. He's the guy that made Gillette, the razor company, people shaving. And it's essentially not fiction. It's his idea for a planned future society. And he actually has like using like the hydroelectric power to power these vast cities and these weird architectural structures. There's actually pictures in here. Fascinating. One of the things you forget about the 19th century socialism, although if you read the Communist Manifesto, which is sort of it's overstated. It's kind of a dead end sort of thing. Like it's like a hired work Marx did that actually he didn't really. He kind of repudiated a little bit, which is dumb conservatives use as a guidebook. He mentions like utopian socialists. Well, many of your 19th century socialists were actually capitalists. It's hard to explain that to people. Medea. No, of course, Medea is a Euripides play. And this Euripides, another plays Medea. A lot of horrific things in here. This collection here by Penguin Classics doesn't have the back eye, which is probably the most horrible, brutal tragedy he ever wrote. It wasn't in here, but this is Robinson Jeffers. Okay, he is a poet. He could read Latin, he could read Greek at 13. He did his own version of Medea, not his own version, his own translation of Medea. Very popular play. Very interesting. Man, what a sick story. What a sick bitch. And of course, more Robinson Jeffers. Actually, this is a book I actually got this is the first printing from the 20s. Dear Judas, another dramatic narrative. Many of Jeffers' large dramatic narratives, like in the vein of Byron, right, could be made into plays, and some of them were. Dear Judas is just really, it's about Jesus. Okay, told from the point of view of Judas. And the idea that maybe Jesus was, instead of the Son of God, maybe he was a madman who nonetheless inspired many downtrodden people. Anyway, again on here, Albert J. Nock, Superfluous Man. I think his autobiography. Albert J. Nock's an interesting guy, one of those progressive people from the early 20th century who then found themselves becoming a right-wing Tory conservative because they didn't like the New Deal. Revolt against the civilization. Lothrop Star. This is Kurtajik's imprint back in the day, reprinting Lothrop Star, the great Lothrop Starter. The idea that, civilizations produce less, you have less children, and then eventually it rots because the Untermensch reproduce far more. Who is this? Proclamation of London, also from Kurtajik's imprint. Francis Parker Yockey, interesting guy. Okay, sort of in the vein of anti-American, pro-European, right-wing views. But and what is this next to that? Oh, that's edgy, huh? Well, you want to get edgy, son? I don't know where I got this, but I think James got this book. Anti-Tech Revolution. Oh, it's a Why and How by no. I don't have that book. No, I'll get a little lighter here. I've gone over this. The Hammer film scores and the musical avant-garde. The idea that you had many of these serialist, modernist composers with the 12-tone, right? You know that the 12-tone. Finding work, of course, in horror films, the very discordant nature of using 12 notes on the scale only once, you get this weird sort of thing that sounds very it sounds very unnerving. Perfect for horror films. Okay? Very different from what it was intended to be. I recommend Pierre Boulez's Philosophy of a Hammer. It's a very, very interesting modernist composition, and in keeping with it, In Search of Concrete Music. Pierre Schaeffer. This is the tape music. Originally, it was like this avant-garde sort of idea of making music from recorded sounds. Originally, the French, this guy here, they did it with wax plates, right? Records. But they took a technology that they had taken from a vanquished country called Germany, using tape. Yes, Germany invented tape to make weird kind of what you would say like early sample music, very bizarre modernist music. I actually like it. So, even though I know it's kind of a dead and horrible. Running out of time here. I'll have to do two parts to this.